Do you think you truly know the people around you? You might believe you can recognize when someone is toxic, when an energy feels heavy, when a behavior crosses the line of what's acceptable. But what if I told you the real dangers aren't the ones you can easily spot? That the most destructive individuals are often the most charming, the kindest faces, even those closest to you, even family. While you work to shield yourself from obvious villains, you may unknowingly be leaving the doors of your psyche wide open to something far more insidious, the unconscious forces of others infiltrating your own mind. Carl Jung devoted his life to studying these hidden dynamics. In The Ego and the Unconscious, he reveals a startling truth. The forces that truly govern us are largely beyond the reach of our conscious awareness. And this isn't just true for you, it's true for everyone. And that is precisely where the danger lies, because when someone is blind to their own inner darkness, that shadow doesn't simply vanish, it seeks a host. And often, that host is you. Perhaps you've never paused to consider this. But reflect now. How many times have you walked away from a conversation feeling inexplicably drained? How many times have you been blamed for something you never did, or cast as the savior in a drama that was never yours to resolve? Jung called this projection, an unconscious mechanism through which others cast onto you what they cannot or will not see in themselves. In that moment, you stop being a person. You become a symbol, a mirror, an imaginary adversary, an idealized hero. But all these roles share one thing. None of them are truly you, and the most unsettling part? You often don't even realize you're caught in this game. You believe you're helping. You think you're being empathetic, mature, supportive, but all the while you're sinking deeper into a psychic field that doesn't belong to you, fighting battles that aren't yours, entangled in dynamics you never created but that now silently control you. And this isn't just about malicious people. Jung was clear. The greatest dangers do not come from consciously evil individuals, but from those who are unconscious, estranged from their own psyche, trapped behind masks, ruled by unresolved traumas, complexes, and repressed desires. They are not necessarily bad, but they are dangerous, and their danger is subtle. It doesn't storm in through the front door. It seeps in day after day through small remarks, veiled criticisms, heavy silences, until, slowly, you begin to question yourself. And once you lose touch with your own psychic reality, you become part of their shadow. Perhaps you're living this right now in a relationship, a friendship, a workplace, maybe even within your family. And perhaps you've been blaming yourself, trying to figure out what's wrong with you. But the truth is, nothing is wrong with you. Something is profoundly wrong with the way you've been made a vessel for someone else's unconscious. In this video, we'll expose one by one the 6 types of people Jung would have identified as emotionally dangerous, not because they act with conscious malice, but because they're driven by internal forces they themselves cannot comprehend. And that's what makes them so destructive. We'll explore Jung's words, his insights, his warnings, drawing directly from works like Aeon, the Ego and the Unconscious, and Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, to help you recognize these profiles. But more than that, we'll invite you to look inward, to consider the possibility that, just maybe, one or more of these archetypes lives within you as well. Are you ready? Take a deep breath and step forward. But be warned. After hearing this, you may never see others or even yourself the same way again. Imagine living with someone who makes you responsible for everything they feel. Someone who turns your very presence into a trigger, who quietly convinces you that you are the cause of their pain, their sadness, their frustration. At first, they appear delicate, sensitive, profound. But slowly you begin to see the truth. You've been drawn into a battlefield that isn't yours, a war you never signed up for, and where you're already at a disadvantage. This is the unconscious manipulator, a person unaware of their own wounds yet projecting them onto others as a way to survive psychologically. Carl Jung once said, "What we do not confront in ourselves, we will encounter as fate." And sometimes that fate has a name, a face, and it sits across from you at the dinner table. The unconscious manipulator is not driven by malice, but by unintegrated pain. They are ruled by repressed traumas, buried wounds, fragmented emotions they've never faced. Rather than turn inward, they aim their unresolved conflicts outward, using you as the canvas for their inner turmoil. This type of person lives in a constant state of chronic projection. According to Jung, projection is a natural function of the psyche, but when it goes unrecognized, it becomes dangerous. In The Ego and the Unconscious, he writes that projection creates a kind of psychic blindness. It imprisons us, preventing us from seeing the other as they truly are. Instead, we see them only as a reflection of what remains hidden within ourselves, and this is precisely what the unconscious manipulator does. They don't truly see you. They see a disowned part of themselves, and they react to that image as if it were real. These individuals often cast themselves as perpetual victims. Nothing is ever their fault. Every emotion they feel becomes someone else's responsibility. If they're angry, it's because you provoked them. If they're sad, it's because you disappointed them. If they feel inferior, it's because you think you're better than them. The distortion is so subtle, so insidious that you begin to doubt yourself. Was I really being insensitive? Did I actually say something wrong? Am I the toxic one? And so the manipulation unfolds, quietly, without a single shout, without a direct demand. It's subtle, emotional, unconscious, and frighteningly effective. What makes it even more dangerous is that these individuals are often charming. They radiate charisma, sensitivity, and alluring emotional depth. And that's the trap. You believe you can help them, that you can be the one to understand them, to heal what others couldn't. But in reality, what you're doing is sacrificing your own psychic well-being, pouring your energy into saving someone who refuses to turn inward and face themselves. And the harder you try, the deeper you sink. Jung warns us, patterns of projection are especially perilous because they cast us into symbolic roles: savior, enemy, traitor, father, mother. Everything except who we truly are. To live bound by a symbolic role is to live inside an illusion. You stop being seen as a real autonomous person. Instead, you become a distorted reflection of another's unconscious mind. The only way to protect yourself from an unconscious manipulator is through awareness, to recognize the patterns, to cut the invisible strings that tie you to their emotional story. And most importantly, to constantly ask yourself, is this emotion truly mine, or has it been implanted in me? Because the unconscious manipulator doesn't break into your life with force. They slip through the crack of your empathy. And once you see this pattern for what it is, the next challenge awaits, recognizing how it can disguise itself even deeper, beneath the mask of the persona. The persona isn't just projection, it's performance. It's living in order to appear as something you're not. In the next section, we'll explore the figure Jung called the bearer of the persona, and why he considered it one of the greatest psychological risks. Because while the unconscious manipulator projects their conflicts onto you, the bearer of the persona can pull you into a world where even you begin to forget who you truly are. If this message resonates with you, don't forget to click subscribe and join us for the next chapter. Thank you for your support. Remember, not all psychological danger comes wrapped in overt hostility. Sometimes it hides behind what looks perfect, behind the always ready smile, the flawless posture, the impeccable image. We live in an age of appearances, where seeming has replaced being. And for Jung, this was no trivial issue. Because when a person over-identifies with their persona, the social mask we wear to navigate the world, they risk severing their connection to their deepest, most authentic self. And those who live for the mask don't just lose themselves, they begin to distort everyone around them. In The Ego and the Unconscious, Jung writes that the persona is not what one truly is, but what oneself and others think one is. In other words, it's an artificial construct, a facade shaped by social, familial, and professional expectations. The persona itself isn't inherently a problem. We all wear masks. It's what allows us to play our social roles, to be a doctor, a teacher, a friend, a sibling. The danger begins when someone believes they are nothing but the mask. When the mask fuses with their face, and everything spontaneous, vulnerable, and authentic gets locked away in the basement of the psyche. The bearer of the persona becomes a master of functional superficiality. They say what others want to hear. They act the right way. They avoid conflict at all costs, but behind the polished exterior lies a soul in quiet ruins, because the more they uphold the image, the more they suffocate their true self, and repression always demands a price. For those who live alongside someone like this, the impact runs deep. You sense that something's off, but you can't quite name it. There's a lack of spontaneity, of truth, of emotional depth. Every interaction feels rehearsed. And worse, the bearer of the persona starts projecting their own demand for perfection onto you. They expect you to perform, to comply, to play. They accumulate, they ferment in the unconscious, and eventually they transform into shadow. And this is where we enter even more dangerous territory, the realm of denied emotions that eventually return with explosive force. In the next section, we'll explore the figure Jung called the owner of the repressed shadow, the one who denies their darkness until it breaks free. There's a type of person who lives meticulously controlled, polished, restrained, always correct, always moderate, always polite. But behind this mask of balance, a force is quietly gathering strength, because everything they've labeled as wrong, ugly, unacceptable, isn't healed, isn't transformed. It's simply pushed down into the deepest basement of the soul. And as Jung wrote in Ion, the shadow is everything that the individual refuses to acknowledge in themselves, yet it insists on being expressed in some way. This is not about some external evil. The shadow isn't the bad out there. It is not the other, it's not the enemy. The shadow is not something outside of you. It's within. It's the hatred you won't admit to feeling, the envy you explain away, the desire you repress, the ambition you disguise as humility. Everything you reject in yourself doesn't vanish. It transforms into shadow. And as Jung taught, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The owner of the repressed shadow doesn't appear dangerous at first glance. In fact, they're often admired, disciplined, helpful, kind, respectable, but something feels off. They can't tolerate weakness in others. They bristle at spontaneity. They're uncomfortable around intense emotions. They always seem tightly wound, yet never explode, until they do, and when that explosion comes, it's devastating. This person lives under constant emotional surveillance. They won't allow themselves to feel, so they judge those who do. They won't permit themselves to fail, so they attack those who stumble. They become moralistic, demanding, controlling. But underneath, it's all a fragile attempt to keep the unconscious locked away. Jung warned, the stronger the persona, the more repressed the shadow. And the more repressed the shadow, the more violent its eruption. You see this pattern in people with disproportionate reactions, those who explode over small things, who hold grudges for years, who sabotage relationships with passive aggression. They're the difficult ones, resentful, critical, bitter, and no one quite understands why. The answer lies in the unintegrated shadow, unseen, unacknowledged, unaccepted. And here's the crucial truth. The shadow isn't only made of bad things. Jung was clear. The shadow also contains your denied potential, your repressed creativity, your hidden strength. But when ignored, all of that turns toxic. And that poison seeps into relationships, families, environments, especially affecting those closest to the person. Living with the owner of the repressed shadow is like walking through an emotional minefield. You never know where to step until something explodes. But this repression doesn't come out of nowhere. It's often fueled by an illusion of superiority, by a rigid moral ideal that uses guilt as a weapon of control. And this brings us to the next figure, the moral controller, the one who doesn't just repress their own desires, but makes you feel guilty for living yours. In the next part, we'll unmask this type, a figure Jung saw as one of the greatest obstacles to psychological freedom, the guardian of virtue who deep down hides their own demons. Not every executioner carries a sword. Some wield crosses, commandments, dogmas, and neatly packaged phrases. They're the ones who claim to act out of ethics, righteousness, and morality. But beneath that facade, They're imprisoning themselves and others in a cage built from guilt and shame. Jung knew this archetype well. For him, when morality is used as a mask, it becomes one of the most insidious forms of psychic repression. This is the essence of the moral controller, someone who, instead of integrating their own shadow, projects it onto others and condemns them for what they cannot accept in themselves. You've likely met someone like this. People quick to point fingers, but never willing to look inward. They position themselves as a moral benchmark, not because they truly embody it, but because they desperately need to maintain the illusion of moral superiority. As Jung warned, the greater the repression, the stronger the compulsion to project the shadow. And that's exactly what the moral controller does. They turn others into sinners, deviants, wrongdoers, anything to avoid facing their own forbidden desires, impulses, and contradictions. But here's the danger. Unlike a typical emotional manipulator, the moral controller genuinely believes they're doing good. They truly think they're correcting, saving, educating you. And that makes their influence even more toxic, because it's wrapped in the authority of virtue, the language of good intentions, and the mask of false spirituality. The criticism arrives wrapped in phrases like, "I'm telling you this for your own good. You'll thank me one day." Someone has to tell you the truth, but make no mistake. This so-called truth isn't neutral, it's soaked in projection. In Ion, Jung explores the archetypes of Christ and Antichrist, symbols of integration and division. The moral controller believes they embody the light. Yet they remain utterly blind to their own darkness. They project evil onto others to preserve the illusion of inner purity. And in doing so, they become dangerous, unable to see the complexities, contradictions, and humanity in the souls around them. If you live near someone like this, you may find yourself carrying a constant, creeping guilt, as if merely existing is already wrong. You begin to feel watched, judged, diminished, even in the most ordinary moments, and the most insidious part. You start to internalize their judgment. You begin to suppress parts of yourself, the natural, the human, the spontaneous, and reshape yourself to fit an ideal that was never yours. The morality of the other becomes your prison. This dynamic is heartbreakingly common. In families, religious settings, rigid environments where obedience is mistaken for virtue. Jung saw this pattern as a profound threat to the journey of individuation. For wherever morality becomes extreme, true self-knowledge disappears. The extreme moralist doesn't actually seek truth. They seek control. And when they can't control the outer world, they turn inward, trying to control the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors of those closest to them. But the moral controller isn't the only one driven by unconscious forces. There's another type, even more volatile, unstable, unpredictable, the complex-driven individual. While the moralist represses and projects, the complex-driven person is completely overtaken by unconscious content. They react from the depths of their unprocessed psyche, as if an invisible puppet master pulls the strings. In the next part, we'll step into this explosive terrain, where consciousness loses the reins and buried traumas take control of the psyche. Prepare to meet the type of person who can embrace you today and destroy you tomorrow, without ever understanding why. If this resonates with you, I invite you to explore my ebook, Beyond the Shadow. Inside, you'll discover Jung's key ideas distilled into practical insights, giving you powerful tools to understand yourself and others on a deeper level. Now, imagine living with someone who in one moment is warm, affectionate, and generous, and the next moment explodes in rage, retreats into icy silence, or accuses you of something that never even crossed your mind. A compliment suddenly becomes a demand. A joke turns into an insult. A gesture of love is misread as a threat. No matter what you do, it feels like you're walking on unstable ground, as if the emotional weather could shift at any second. This is what it's like to live alongside someone dominated by unconscious complexes. For Jung, complexes are autonomous emotional nuclei, clusters of memories, wounds, and feelings buried deep in the unconscious that can unexpectedly take control of the conscious mind. They are like fragmented personalities inside us, born from unresolved traumas, unhealed psychic wounds, and painful life experiences. In Psychological Types and the Ego and the Unconscious, Jung describes how these complexes hijack behavior, leading a person to react not to the present moment, but to echoes of the past. A simple comment triggers an old abandonment. An innocent question reopens a buried rejection. A casual disagreement awakens a forgotten humiliation, and those closest to them pay the price. The person trapped in a complex doesn't realize they're being steered by these inner forces. When they lash out in anger, spiral into sadness, or hold on to resentment far beyond reason, they believe they're acting rationally, but they're not. They're reliving undigested emotions. And the unsettling part? This doesn't happen consistently. There are moments of calm, of warmth, of genuine love, interrupted by sudden emotional storms. This pattern makes the relationship even more confusing and addictive. You find yourself thinking, they're not always like this, sometimes they're wonderful. And that's what keeps you hooked, because those real moments of affection make the ruptures feel like exceptions, not patterns. But each beautiful moment is followed by an unpredictable break, leaving you lost in an emotional hurricane you can't explain. In an effort to keep the peace, you begin to adapt, shrink, mold yourself. You avoid certain topics, you measure your words, you tiptoe carefully, all to avoid waking the sleeping monster inside them. But here's the hard truth, you're not the one waking the monster. The monster was always there, lying in wait, hungry, ready to rise at the slightest trigger, and when it does, it devours everything in its path. For Jung, unacknowledged complexes slowly colonize the psyche. They speak for you, feel for you, act for you. And for the complex-driven person, this takeover happens again and again. They may be ruled by a complex of inferiority, martyrdom, abandonment, persecution, each one carrying its own narrative, its own emotional script, its own demands. And the more you try to keep the peace, the more you fall into the illusion that you can somehow control the uncontrollable. Living close to someone like this feels like living in a state of constant alert. There's no stable ground. The present is always haunted by old ghosts, and eventually you start absorbing those ghosts yourself. You doubt your memory. You question your emotions. You lose trust in your reality. Without realizing it, you too are being colonized by their unconscious. But the most dangerous part is still ahead. Because while the complex-driven person swings between emotional highs and lows, there's another type. One who doesn't shout, doesn't explode, doesn't accuse, but slowly drains your energy until you have nothing left. In the next and final part, we'll explore the figure of the psychic vampire, the one who feeds on your time, your attention, your empathy, and leaves you exhausted, depleted, hollow. With them, we'll close this journey by revealing what Jung saw as the path out of this unconscious jungle, because some people don't seek your presence. They seek your energy, and they'll do anything to siphon it, not through aggression or overt hostility, but through subtle demands, chronic victimhood, emotional dependency disguised as love. This is the psychic vampire, the most silent and insidious form of emotional draining. Though Jung didn't use this term, he warned us of its archetypal force, the unresolved symbiotic bond, the pathological attachment that stunts growth and dissolves the boundaries of the self. Throughout the ego and the unconscious and ion, Jung reveals one of the greatest threats to individuation, relationships where two people stop seeing themselves as separate beings and instead become psychic extensions of one another. The psychic vampire thrives in this dynamic. They need your attention, your daily comfort, your constant availability, but beneath their neediness is a void that doesn't belong to you, and one you can never fill. At first you offer support, then you give your time. Then you start tolerating emotional abuse, telling yourself you're being understanding, until one day you wake up drained. You no longer know where they end and where you begin. The exhaustion isn't just physical, it's existential. It feels like your soul is being siphoned away, drop by drop, day after day. Jung spoke of those who, unable to sustain themselves psychically, attach themselves to others like emotional parasites. It may sound harsh, but it's the truth. The psychic vampire doesn't want to grow. They want to be carried. But the real danger isn't just the exhaustion, it's the dissolution of yourself. You start to feel guilty for wanting space, selfish for needing silence, cold for setting boundaries. Because the psychic vampire is a master at reversing roles. From victim, they become accuser. From needy, they become manipulator. And before you know it, you're living to avoid crisis, to preserve peace, to maintain a bond that's slowly killing you inside. But Jung offers us a path to make the unconscious conscious. And that applies not just to others, but to ourselves. Because maybe at some point in life you too have been a psychic vampire, or a complex-driven person, or a mask bearer. None of us are immune. We all carry shadows. We all carry pain. The difference is who has the courage to look inward, and who chooses to project that burden outward. This video was a mirror, a deep dive into the dynamics that bind us, hurt us, and keep us unconscious. If you've made it this far, it means you're ready to see, to name, to break free, and that is the first and most powerful step toward freedom. Not blaming others, but stepping out of the hostage position and reclaiming sovereignty over your own psyche. Now, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below. Which of these profiles have you encountered? And which do you honestly recognize within yourself? Your comment might spark awareness for you and for someone reading. And before you go, a heads up. The next video is essential. It will take you even deeper into this journey of self-discovery. So, keep watching. You need to see it, because the more light we shine on the unconscious, the less it controls us.